Hey everybody, Jason Burmis here, and I've talked a little bit about it, but I wasn't ready to do a video yet because I suspected we weren't getting the full story when it first broke that Bernie Sanders was getting a heart procedure. Right away, I thought to myself, well, this guy had a heart attack, but the major media, instead of talking openly about that, I just want to point out before we go to our guest, Sanjay Gupta over here, next to Ryan Nobles, who actually I know personally just by happenstance, basically said, oh, he must have had some discomfort. But then he starts talking about a stint and then a second stint. And now, within the last hour, the New York Times and others are confirming, yes, this 78-year-old man did have a heart attack. So to talk about this, if there's any future in this campaign, what this really means, is Robbie Martin of MediaRoots.org. His sister is the other half, Abby Martin. And we had you on not so long ago, but this is a huge, huge moment in this 2020 election. What does it mean, Robbie?
I think it's a very bad sign. I mean, first of all, I'd like to say that holding out hopes that Bernie Sanders is going to be the savior in this election, I think is a bad idea. Let's just put it that way. And so now that we have news that he's had an actual heart attack, I think that it's very dire, Jason, that a 78-year-old man who just had a heart attack is pretty much the best hope we have in terms of defeating Donald Trump in the election. I mean, that's a really dire situation. And not just that, just the idea that holding out hope that Bernie is somehow going to fundamentally change the system, even if he does win. I think we're just getting stuck in that same cycle, that same hype cycle.
Well, hold on. If he does win, let's be honest, he's got to be out of at least one debate. Nobody really knows how serious this is other than they're
I
saying
agree.
that he's talking. But this is not a minor procedure. They tried to downplay it for as long as they could. I'm not sure why. I feel like you should have been open and honest right out of the gates. But like you just said, this guy's going to have a real decision to make because obviously running for president of the United States is stressful. And stress affects your heart. And I'm sure that any doctor worth his salt is going to advise against a man running against 9 other, well, I'd say 8. I still like Tulsi, and she's going to be in those next debates. 9 other vipers. And then if somehow he snake bites all of those bastards, he has to go against the biggest one and the most prepared of all, Donald Trump, who's not going to back down, who's not going to play nice. And quite frankly, I don't think there's any chance he gets the nomination no matter what. But to me, the big issue is, we had one anti-war voice, Bernie, in the last debate, and we were going to have 2 with Tulsi qualifying in this new one. They at least gave Bernie some time, Tulsi not so much. Does this marginalize the anti-war voice on the left even further if he can't make the next debate?
I mean, yeah, it definitely does, Jason. But, to tell you the truth, I think that the anti-war voice on the left, even if we're lumping in Tulsi, is very, very weak. I know that Tulsi says a lot of good things that I personally like, but I think when you really zoom out from this, we are in a worse position in terms of the anti-war sentiment being voiced by politicians than we were during some of the most horrifying years of the Bush administration. I mean, you don't have to go back that far to find much stronger rhetoric coming out of candidates Ron Paul, Mike Gravel when he was running previously, and Kucinich. So to have this now as sort of our standard or where the bar is in terms of where anti-war sentiment is at in the Democratic side of things with the most leftist or supposedly leftist progressive candidates, I think that's a really bad sign of where we're at right now. And even when you include these 4 freshmen, lefty squad, whatever, they're considered radical leftists. But when you look at their foreign policy, Ocasio-Cortez, even Ilhan Omar, they have very poor anti-war view. I mean, they're barely anti-war. I mean, and they do play into a lot of the Russiagate rhetoric, a lot of the national security state rhetoric. So I think we're honestly in a worse situation in terms of this point of view being not just in the debates, but in mainstream politics in general than we were even during the Bush years. I mean, to talk about the anti-war left movement being dead, I think that what we have now is sort of a overall deafening, or I guess like hampering, or whatever you want to call it, of the sort of the power of what's I believe is like a truly anti-war sentiment. You know, when you have Tucker Carlson being lifted up as the main anti-war hero, I think that's really an illustration of how bad of a state we're in.
Well, you know, I'm glad you took that point, because while everybody still may feel the burn on that end and the anti-war end, I want to point out this video that recently came out, or I had never seen it before, but Bernie Sanders being asked the important Assange question that will never be asked in the debates. So let's hear what Bernie has to say here.
Hey, do it. Do you support Julian Assange?
Do I support Julian Assange?
Will you pardon him?
I can't say it just yet. It's a longer
Please, sir, please.
I can't say it. That's a long discussion. I'm aware of the issue. That's your anti-war hero. And by the way, Flick Off, thank you so much for the super chat. He says, no way he would make it through the 4 years, even if he somehow won. You would be voting for his VP. That's a legitimate statement, but again, I don't think he gets that far. And like you said, when the bar has been lowered so far, the guy who's supposed to be that anti-war left guy for free speech and exposing corruption can't even talk about Assange. He literally says, I can't say it. What does that say about not only Bernie Sanders in general, but how he hasn't been able to stand up to the establishment whatsoever? It's almost like a facade, Robbie. He couldn't stand up to Hillary Clinton in 2016 when he won the DNC and should have been the nominee. So to me, that was just strike three on Bernie. I like him up there for some of his rhetoric that I happen to agree with. But other than that, I mean, that's establishment politician talk.
I think even though I don't love a lot of the stuff he writes, but Matt Taibbi was really correct when he said that this time around, Bernie's radicalism, or supposed radicalism, is a lot less than it was even in 2016. And you're right, Jason. He didn't stand up to the DNC or Hillary Clinton like he should have, especially after those leaks came out. I'm even just talking about before the leaks came out. I was really shocked at how poor his debate performance was and how much he seemed to keep the gloves on with Hillary Clinton, even before those leaks. After the leaks, he should have stood up to them. But Matt Taibbi is right that this time around,
he should have went balls deep, Robbie.
Yeah, he should have
put the gloves on. He should have been Van Damme dipping glue in glass and swinging. I don't understand, but continue with Taibbi.
I mean, he really was right that Bernie's radicalism, even if you want to believe that he was radical back then, it's even less now, and we need more now, not less. But unfortunately, he has, I think, learned too well how to run as a presidential candidate, and it's actually damaged his radical credentials to a significant degree. I think that he would have never, and maybe I'm wrong about this, somebody can correct me, but I don't remember him talking about Maduro being a brutal dictator or Assad being a brutal dictator, or talking this much about Putin in the 2016 election. That alone is really troubling equivocations to the sort of the DC blob national security state. Even if he feels that way, he doesn't have to say it. It's like it's just such blatant, pathetic equivocating to those people in DC. And it's like, you don't have to do that. Stop. So I'm really disappointed. I don't even know. I mean, I probably will vote for him in the primary.
If you get a chance, Robbie, I think you're being... I mean, listen, I get it. There's a Bernie Sanders machine out there that wants him to run, and they feel the burn, and they want him up there. But, let's see what this guy looks like the first time a camera is put on him after this heart attack. Let's be real, man. I've seen people half his age have these heart attacks, be out of commission. I mean, you look at somebody like Kevin Smith just had one a few years back in his mid-40s. He's out of commission for quite some time. And True. We're not, what are we, man? No, November 3rd is not that far away. You know what I'm saying? On the other end of the spectrum, Let's be honest.
Totally this election right, cycle. No, you have a good point. I think we're going to have to wait and see how much of this is actually still being covered up. Because I think even if you're the most diehard burner ever, you have to admit that he didn't want to tell the public that he had a legit heart attack.
I know.
So now that he's coming out of the hospital acting like he's fine and he's ready to hit the campaign trail again, and he just needs to rest for a couple days at home, I think we need to be skeptical of that too. Even his supporters, we really need some answers, his supporters and just people who generally want to vote for him to beat Trump. We need answers, and I do think it is hard to trust at this point that he's going to be truthful about the state of his health. And I do fear what you're saying could happen. I mean, he could drop out any moment here.
Yeah.
And we need honesty. I mean, I know it's a political risk to talk about, how bad your health is, but we need, that's what we need from someone like Bernie. We need realness. And unfortunately, I feel that this was not just a sad moment for his campaign, but also a political misstep to not fully disclose what happened. So I honestly don't know, Jason. It would be really sad if he drops out, but I think it's a very real possibility at this point.
All right, let's circle around because you mentioned some Putin in there. He said some Russia stuff. And Putin recently was at a forum where he said, of course, we're planning on interfering in the elections coming up. Just don't tell anybody, and joked about it. And I was like, you know what? You can hate the guy all you want, but well played. Way to play up on the media hype around it. And then just today we find out that the Ukraine is indeed, the top prosecutor indeed is now reopening the case on Hunter Biden. So, these two things are going to reflect somewhere in this election cycle. And like I said, we have until next November to vote. So we'll see if Joe Biden's even around in 3 months, let alone 6. Does this new scandal and the fact the prosecution is going after his son and may find connections with him ultimately kill his chance? And does he get pushed aside? And like I said, in the next 3 to 6 months, do we see it down to 4 or 5 of these establishment types running?
I don't know, Jason. I mean, I think if Trump was strategically smarter and his people were strategically smarter about trying to roll out this Hunter Biden corruption thing, Trump might have been able to sort of use that to destroy Biden. But what I see happening in this scenario is that the establishment media and these Democrats who've been trying to take down Trump this whole time seems to have cornered him in a sense where I don't know how much he can effectively use that at this point. Even though I believe there's definitely something there, it's just too obvious, even on the face of it, that he wasn't trying to actually investigate corruption in Ukraine, that he was trying to get dirt, even if it's real dirt on Hunter Biden, to help him in the election. I think that is actually really going to hurt Trump. I'm kind of coming around to the idea that perhaps even some Republicans, maybe this is too optimistic, but they might even start seeing, Trump is actually not, with these world leaders, he is not trying to actually root out corruption. And this is a transparent effort to tar his political opponent, even if the things are real and legitimate that he's trying to investigate. So I do, at first I was thinking this could backfire on the Democrats, but now I'm actually coming around to the idea that this could have backfired on Trump. And
I don't know. I think that they're already trying to spin it into the China investigation. If you haven't seen that yet, it's almost shifting now that the prosecution has said they're opening the. I see what I saw in the last. I mean, again, we just did an interview together in the last 48 hours. Was the shift to the talking points of China? For instance, I believe it was CNN, and he was asking a fellow Republican because he was adamant that he was happy that Hunter Biden and these people would be investigated, and then he said, "This is how he phrased it. So, are you happy that the president asked for an investigation by authoritarian China?" So now we're going to call China authoritarian to investigate his political enemies, because obviously that doesn't have the gravity of this Burisma scandal. Okay, so right there I saw a shift. So I'm going to disagree with you a little bit there. I think that what they're trying to do is pivot it now to more of this authoritarian China deal. But I think, they're going to have.
Well, I don't know if you saw the new text. I mean, some new text leaked about they're still on Ukraine too. I mean, some new tech conversations came out.
Yeah,
that don't look very good for Trump.
Well, I would just say that they'll shift to that only because the Ukraine has actual, legitimacy. That there is corruption in that Burisma scandal. He can continue to go back to that. Even today, when he was talking to the press, he discussed how there was still more investigations into what happened in 2016. And we've seen more news on the Hillary email server even yesterday. So I don't think I think he's trying to take the gloves off in every manner that Bill Barr is telling him he can, and Rudy Giuliani behind the scenes is telling him he can. I think it's going to be interesting to see, because I just don't think Biden himself is going to be able to survive this. He's neck deep and has been in corruption for a long time. But as we've discussed previously, I don't think he was their pick in the first place. I think they like Kamala Harris. I know there's a lot of focus on Elizabeth Warren. But, the clown show came to town yesterday with Jacob Wall and his hoax a lot. She's banging a 24-year-old Marine. I mean.
Yeah. I mean, I have to take a differing opinion on where this is going to go, because, I mean, even if we're looking at it from the angle of this framing of the deep state trying to unseat Trump, I find it very interesting that William Barr and Rudy Giuliani are so involved in this, because William Barr was once considered one of the main people who helped cover up Iran-Contra. Rudy Giuliani is a 9/11 suspect. He has many, many shady deep state connections. So even if you're looking at it from that framework, I would be concerned that these people are actually working against Trump somehow.
And you know what? Yeah, well, you're not wrong there. And I believe you tweeted out something about Bernard Kerik, Giuliani's right-hand man, a guy who did prison time for his corruption. He was so blatantly corrupt, and now he gives speeches in front of the Council on Foreign Relations and these types of think tanks. And what was that tweet about?
Oh, that tweet was about how there's a deep state coup to unseat Trump, which I find fascinating, because Bernard Kerik is obviously some kind of deep state tool. I mean, he was literally the first person to say on TV, give the official pancake theory. During a live press conference, when people asked him if there were bombs in the buildings, reporters were actually asking that at the time, because that's what reporters thought happened. And he said, no, unequivocally, it was a pancake collapse. He explained pretty much the NIST report the day of 9/11. That's a very suspicious thing to do. And I guess it's just really strange to me, Jason, that, and I'm just going to pivot here to this idea. I think that it actually is a sign that Donald Trump is in trouble this time, when even someone like Tucker Carlson is backpedaling on some of the defenses he had mounted on Trump originally. This is a guy who personally speaks to Donald Trump on the phone. At first, he said that there was absolutely nothing wrong or impeachable about the Ukrainian phone call. Now he's actually changing his tune a little bit and saying how it was actually very wrong, but he doesn't know if it's impeachable. So I find that interesting that some things are shifting. There is sort of a civil war kind of happening at Fox News right now, which is also very interesting. So I'm just going to sort of hang on and see where this is going to go. I'm not going to get too optimistic about it, but I think that this is more real, a lot more real than Russiagate. And if we're just talking about the fundamental premise of Russiagate that was unprovable, that Trump sought foreign help to interfere in his own election, they couldn't prove, he was vindicated in that. This is sort of more of a naked example of him trying to do that is kind of already out there. It's not really something that can be denied, that he is trying to do that. And it is to help him in the election. It's not for any other real purpose. So, I mean, that kind of puts it in a different category. I'm not saying
it's not, but you could also argue vengeance. I mean, it's not like he doesn't have a beef with these people. He obviously does. I mean, they went after him balls deep. I mean, when he was saying that the FBI was tapping his office, and everybody was, that crazy Trump, he's nutty. And then they're like, we were because Russia was in the mix. So to me, don't get me wrong. I think you're 100% right. Obviously, he wants to thin the herd and take out any kind of competition. But I also think, he's a guy that wants vengeance. He does.
No, I agree.
He wants.
I think this goes beyond. Yeah, no, it's definitely very personal for him.
Yeah.
And that's what's interesting, too. If you look back at this original FBI probe, the Republicans have been determined to paint the narrative that Obama was directing this FBI probe. But what's interesting is in Obama's case, even if he was so careful that there is zero evidence to link him directly to the FBI probe. And I find that fascinating that he, even if he was behind it, he was a lot more politically savvy than Trump in that area. Trump really opened the door for this by nakedly trying to do this, and I think that's the difference there. I mean, So I don't know. I almost feel like at this point Trump is even listening to less of his own advisors. And it's strange. Even the way he's talking, like I don't know if it's actually helping him to go out and talk like this right now in the press. Like Bill Clinton was actually totally silent, like when the Monica Lewinsky scandal happened. So strategically speaking, I think that's probably a better idea. But Trump, you know, just like always, he's always into counterpunching. So to him, he thinks this is the best strategy. So I don't know. I mean, I'm just going to sit back and watch.
All right. Robbie Martin, MediaRoots.org, and the YouTube channel is a very heavy agenda. They can subscribe. When are you putting out content over there, Robbie? Is there a regular basis? You're doing it 2-3 times a week?
No, right now it's pretty slow, Jason. But I'm hoping to start doing it at least weekly. And I know that's not very frequent compared to how much you do it, but we put our podcast out every week now. So that's a more reliable way to check out what we do.
Is there anything else that you want to kind of throw into the mix about this whole Bernie Sanders situation that we didn't cover?
You know, I can't think of anything off the top of my head right now, Jason, but one thing that's been interesting to me about Sanders is I've been curious recently, where was he during the Bush years? How come we don't remember him being an outspoken person during those years? And I'm not saying that he wasn't. It's just interesting to me that all of a sudden he's now considered this really radical senator, but I feel like we should have known about him more being, you know, radically anti-Bush or radically anti the Iraq war. I know he voted against it, but that's curious to me. And I'm interested to see where he was, like, what was he doing? You know, I want to look him up on C-SPAN during the Bush years and to see actually how radical he was and how radical he spoke against the Bush administration. Because as far as I know, a Republican, Lincoln Chafee, said more harsh things against the Bush administration to their faces when he had the opportunity to. So I think that's a curiosity for me, and I'd like to look into that.
That's a good one, and I love it. Robbie Martin, always a pleasure. Follow him on Twitter, one of the more fun Twitter feeds from a left perspective, in my opinion. And folks, if you like this channel, you can support it by going to my GoFundMe, which I just started this week. We already raised $482. We're going to try to hit that $5,000 goal this month. And hopefully you're enjoying these different interviews. And by the way, Peter Dale Scott, the man who coined the term deep state, the great author and poet, is going to be coming on the show. I'm going to get his book, Terror and Poetry. We're going to be discussing that, among other things, but looking forward to that coming up in the third week of October. Make sure you're thumbing this video up, you're subscribing, you're sharing this stuff on social media. It helps me more than you can imagine. Remember, all my documentary films, Loose Change Final Cut, Fabled Enemies, Invisible Empire, A New World Order Defined, and Shade the Motion Picture, all available free here in the playlist section under documentaries. I love you guys. Thank you for watching, and I will see you on the flip side.